Hello and welcome to Julie's Unknown Podcast. And this episode, I have a guest speaker, May, who I had the pleasure of meeting. I think it must have been about over a year ago,
Yeah.
definitely way over a year ago. I was on her podcast and then also ended up doing an Akashic Records reading with her as well, which was really cool that I do want to tap into because I think that's an interesting
Mhm.
topic. But May, would you love to introduce yourself to the audience?
Oh my gosh, where do I start? That's
I know you do like
really
all the
prepared
things.
to talk about myself. Yeah, so I may I have I do so many different things, and I am very much one of those people that have spent way too much time trying to put myself into a box, trying to make everything fit into a box to make just everything, be nice and neat. And as a manifester, that's just not it's just not it. It's not my vibes. I'm meant to do all the things, initiate different things. And so I do Akashic Records readings, I do tarot readings, I do web design, where we really focus on energy first, design second. I also have a kids brand called Wolf and Whimsy Kids, where I write books and create notebooks and journals and things like that, focusing on, curiosity and joy and confidence and mindfulness and all of those different topics. And really, I'm very multifaceted, multidimensional. We all are. And I just decided that I'm done being only one thing. And so I do it all.
Do all the things. I love that. I love that you tapped into that because I think that sometimes we try so hard to be that
Mhm.
one thing.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I think also like with schooling, right? In my opinion, like growing up and going to school, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, you got to pick like that one major, that one area, whether it's like what science, it's business, or it's arts, like pick that one thing. And it's hard to pick the one thing, like even in school, because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that looks interesting, but that also does look interesting too. Why do I need to like just pick this? Or electives, you just have like one list and you have to pick one out of that list.
Yeah. I mean, I have many bones to pick with our current education system.
Yeah.
And I'll just say that we're both in Canada, so we have very, provincially the education systems are a little bit different, but nationwide they're very well the same. Yeah, I have many a bone to pick with the education system, but even just like going off of what you just said, literally you get to 12th grade and you still have to raise your hand to ask to go to the bathroom, and you're expected to figure out your whole entire life.
Yeah.
And like it just doesn't make sense,
No.
right?
And
There's no independence, nothing of that is taught. No critical thinking, no like tapping into desire and what it is that you actually like and how to do that in this world. And we live in such a world where everything that you want to do and everything that you desire and everything that you love is so easily accessible, and you can just do it. We no longer live in a world that's like, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a nurse, I'm going to be a teacher, with the titles, I guess, the things that are easy to say, right? Like when people
right,
ask me what I do, I don't have a simple answer like, oh, I'm a nurse,
right.
right? And so it like that's why I have a kids brand. That's how I started my kids brand actually. Was just
Really?
like, I'm done. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is where we're going. I don't know if this is what you what you thought you were gonna get, but when I did my master's degree in educational psychology,
Mhm.
and when I did that, as a master's program, there has to be like a thesis or some sort of project, and so I did what was very originally named special activity, which basically meant that I got to prepare my own project. I had to have a supervisor and all that stuff. I got to design my own thing and carry it out. And so that's what I did. I taught yoga and mindfulness in schools, and in particular, an oral school for the deaf. So all of the kids there were deaf or hard of hearing. They all had cochlear implants or Baha implants. And I wrote a book about it. And that was my master's degree. And from there, I started creating resources for educators. So everyone is an educator, right? Like preschool teachers, elementary school teachers, daycare providers, like everyone. And I started creating resources for educators to implement yoga and mindfulness and guided imagery and all of that kind of stuff in their spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it's evolved. So I have journals, I have notebooks, there are, books and stuff that I've written for kids on all of these topics. And it's all because I really just don't like our school system.
Yeah. No, I don't, and I don't like it either. And I find that is beautiful in the way that that is what got you started in that one aspect of what you do. And it's funny because you mentioned that you did it for in like hard of hearing and people. I don't know if I told you this, but I have a hearing loss.
Well, I don't know that you ever did tell me, but I know.
Oh, you know.
And I will say, and let me tell you how I know though, because this isn't like I know, Julie. I'm not dumb. My mom is deaf. And so
Okay.
I grew up in a hard of hearing household, right? And so for me, picking up as soon as I meet someone, I can tell whether or not you have hearing loss because I've grown up in this environment.
Interesting.
Right. And so it was, this is one of the sentences actually in the start of my book that I wrote for my master's degree is like, hearing loss is something that I know about and have known about my whole life, but it was something that I never knew that I knew about.
Interesting.
Right. It was just one of those things that it was so normal and natural for me. And when I sat down to write my book, of course there has to be, because it is part of a master's degree, so there has to be like a research component. And so I had to do research on the cochlear implants and the Baha implants, and it all had to be source cited.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually wrote the whole sections without the source
Interesting.
because I didn't need it. And then I had to go back and like and read the sources and actually cite it and write out the citations and stuff like that. But I wrote the whole book without any of that. And it's something that just comes so naturally to me. It's
But that's your line too, like your profile, your line too,
yeah.
which is like natural gifts. And what I love about that line, because I'm a line too. I'm a 2-4 and you're a 5-2. And that line is interesting because it's like we don't need to necessarily do a course or a degree or have any sort of piece of paper for our gifts. Our gifts come in so easy, and because they come so easy, we don't realize them.
Yeah.
That's what I've realized. Like I would have people be like, "Oh my God, you're so good at this." And I'm like, "Yeah, but can't you do it too?" Like it's
Yeah. What do you mean you don't know anything about hearing loss? Doesn't
yeah.
everybody?
But yeah,
Yeah.
so I find that interesting that you mentioned that, and having have knowing your, like part of your human design. I'm like, oh yeah, there's the line too. Like she didn't need you didn't need to cite, but because you were doing the masters, obviously
Yeah.
there's the curriculum of what is required. Getting back to
And
the
legal stuff.
educational system. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is like, so even though you said you knew,
Mm-hmm.
what were some of the things that you've caught with me that were able to pinpoint that you're like, oh, she has a hearing loss?
I can hear it in your voice.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's the sound of your voice.
Mm, very interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I think that I'm clairaudient, and so I think that the hearing part, like when I hear your voice, that's how that comes through. But yeah, I can hear it in your voice, and that's how I pick it up with everyone that I
yeah,
meet with hearing loss. If they.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense because it's what you hear does affect your speech as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that sometimes like I do struggle, like, saying certain words, like pronouncing them, but also enunciating them. That
Yep.
I do struggle a little bit here and there. And like my hearing loss is mild to moderate. So it's not the severe, but it's still to the point that I do need to wear hearing aids. But then I can also still go without them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. And um my mom has had hearing loss since she was about 2 years old, and so for me, like, I know nothing different of her,
Mhm.
except that, as I grew up, her hearing loss got progressively worse, and she has quite severe hearing loss now. But you're right, it's the way that you enunciate words, and in the way that you pronounce certain things, and also just the sound, like the, I guess, tone. I'm not, yeah, like the tone of your voice. And then, with my mom, she also doesn't enunciate words the way that someone with a natural hearing ability can. And she also like mixes up words.
Mm,
And, and with her as well, growing up in the 70s and 80s, there wasn't the technology, and my grandparents certainly didn't have the means to be able to go and get my mom, a hearing aid or anything like that.
yeah.
And we didn't know a whole lot about hearing loss then, and there wasn't the technology with the hearing aids and the implants that there are now. And so, my mom grew up in a time where she was kind of, if she didn't hear it, she, oh well. But she went to school and she did the best that she could. But there's things that I notice about her where um I hate to like say like generalize things, but sometimes I'll go, Mom, that's really kind of like basic knowledge. And it's not because she doesn't know, it's because she didn't hear it,
Yeah.
right? She missed it in
Yeah.
school. Or and I find with my mom as well. And again, she grew up, she's there are 6 kids in her family, grew up in a time where, it was push through, keep going, sink or swim sort of energy and attitude. But she always needs to talk because she doesn't want to miss something.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Or when we were growing up, my sister and I, my dad worked away a lot. And so when my dad was away, like for like overnight, my mom didn't sleep because she was afraid that it like if the house caught on fire and she didn't hear the alarm go off, or if someone like broke in and she didn't hear. We always had dogs growing up, so we never feared anybody breaking in. But
yeah.
if there was some kind of emergency and she didn't hear the alarm, or she didn't hear something, right? It's a safety thing. It's a just trying to live
Yeah. I
in
get
this world.
that. I get that. Yeah, for sure. Because I know, well, right now I live with my partner, but for a while I did live on my own. And I remember always locking the doors at night because, I was just afraid somebody was going to come
Mhm.
in while I'm sleeping. Little things like that I wouldn't hear because I can sleep through anything.
Yeah.
And when I'm out, I'm out. I think like, oh, there's been times where even thunder won't wake me up because I'm
Wow.
just like, it's not that I can hear the thunder when I'm awake, but it's
Mhm.
if I'm not focused on something, if I'm
Yeah.
not focused on listening for something, I won't hear it. So that same thing with conversation. I need to be paying attention to the person that I'm having a conversation with. If I am looking somewhere else or I'm doing something else and somebody is talking to me but not getting my attention, I won't hear them.
Hmm.
With or without hearing aids, it's the same thing. It's because my focus is on something else. It's almost like I'm in my own little bubble. And so
Yeah.
I always tell people, like, if you're talking to me, you need to like tap or, get my attention. And then I'm fully like paying attention to you and I can listen to you.
Yeah.
Even once sometimes I'll go over to a friend's house and she loves talking, like I'll be doing my work and she'll be doing her work and she loves talking to her dogs. And it's really hilarious. And I once told her, I was like, okay, I don't know when you're talking to your dogs, when you're talking to me. So like, please grab my attention if you need to talk to me, because while you're talking to your dogs, I'm just going to ignore you. And that's cool because I know you're just talking to them, but get my attention when you're addressing me.
Yeah.
So little things like that. And I get the survival aspect too. I have been thinking about for quite some time of getting a dog and training the dog to be my ears basically, and
Yeah.
to hear, because they do, I read up on it that they train them for specific sounds, and what the dog does, it physically nudges you
Hmm.
for those sounds that you're supposed to hear. So like, let's say the doorbell rings, if you don't hear it, the dog will nudge you, right? Because the dog
Right.
can't bark, right?
Yeah.
Especially because if it's meant for like people who are completely deaf, they're not
Yeah.
going to hear the dog
If it
bark.
barks, you won't hear that either. So that would be really cool.
Yeah, I've looked into it. There's a place I know, well, like out here in BC, in Vancouver, and I think also in Victoria, that does that kind of training. So I have looked into it. It's just a matter of when it feels right to get a dog. Like right now it doesn't feel right,
Hmm.
but it's something that I do want to get, just because it is that security, the safety, small little things.
Yeah.
And if I catch a cold, because I get congested, I go, like, I can't hear anything. I remember
Yeah.
when I was like downtown Montreal, and I'm like, it's so quiet here.
Ah, no.
No, but I was just completely deaf. And it's like, again, with or without hearing aids, hearing aids are great. Yes,
Hmm.
they help, but they're not perfect. Like, I still miss
Yeah.
things with hearing aids.
Yeah, I think that's a really big misconception about hearing aids is that, they don't make things clearer. They just amplify the sound that is being, you know, given to you or whatever, right? And so people often make the mistake, like my mom has a Baja implant. And so people often mistake that because she has the implant, and I'm sure it's the same with you, that she can hear like a natural hearing person does. And that's simply not the case. They don't make you, hear as though you have natural hearing ability. It's just they amplify sound.
Yeah, and it's all sound too. And that is something that I explain to people. I'm like, yeah, the sound is amplified. And I know that there's higher price points of like hearing aids that are more digital and they like reduce
Mhm.
background noise, but the ones I have don't really do that. So yeah, if I'm at a bar, I'm hearing
Yeah.
people talk, but I'm hearing like all the other background noise. I'm hearing the bartender do their thing behind the bar. So it's overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
And it's interesting where your mom was the one who spoke in order not to miss anything, whereas I take mostly the back seat and I try to listen to everybody, but then I get overwhelmed, especially in groups when there's more than one conversation happening at the same time. I don't know what to do because I can only
Yeah.
focus on one and I have to pick one. But sometimes both are interesting, or other times none are interesting, and then I zone out.
Yeah. You guys are boring. Like,
Yeah, like I'm just gonna be like in my own little bubble, like just
mhm.
zoning out, pretending I'm listening.
I think for my mom that comes from growing up in a household of six kids.
Wow.
And so yeah, if she's the one that's always talking, then the focus is always on her, right? And so you don't, and then she doesn't miss anything. So like I don't have to get her attention because I'm already looking at her because she's already talking,
Right.
right? Or if she is talking and she has the focus of other people, and other, if there are three of us in a conversation and I say something to you and my mom's sitting here, if she's a part of the conversation, then she's not missing anything. Then she's not missing, information or, whatever it might be. And when my mom's out in the crowd, she turns her hearing aids off. She just like turns the volume down. She's like, no, I'm just tuning you guys out.
Yeah, I've done
Um,
that too.
but we also, and it's things like, when we're in a crowd, um, and I'm like trying to get my mom's attention, if she's kind of like further away from me and I can't, readily nudge her or anything like that, I don't yell the word mom. like I'm not like mom, because how many other, I'm thinking of like events, you know, like on Christmas Eve where everyone from town goes down to like see Santa Claus, and you know, there's a whole thing, and that's a small town thing. But like in that type of environment, I wouldn't be yelling mom, because there are other people there and kids also yelling mom.
Right.
So she doesn't hear me,
Mm-mm.
because my mom, like me saying the word mom, just drown is just lost in everybody else saying the word. So I'll yell out ma, because we don't, you know, we don't readily say that, right?
Right.
So ma is something that catches her attention, or I'll just yell out her name.
Yeah, that's another way. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
like all the, you know, the little like tips and the tricks and the things that I'm like, like, doesn't everybody know this? But they
exactly.
don't.
And there's your
They
line
don't.
too.
No. It's just, yeah, again, and then like these are like prime examples of how, you know, hearing loss is something that I've always known about without realizing that I knew about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is that I am seeing more and more people with hearing aids. So it is something that is becoming more common than when I was growing up. When I was growing up, I felt like I was that one kid in the entire grade and actually entire school. Like in elementary school, I was the only one. And then in high school, there was one other girl. But again, yeah, not that many. And now I find myself just going into a store, seeing somebody with it, going to like a coffee shop, seeing someone with the hearing aids, and I'm like, oh, I'm like seeing it everywhere. And I don't know what everybody else's reasoning as to why they have hearing aids, but I do know that things such as like loud concerts,
Mm-hmm.
headphones, all those things that don't help the problem.
Yeah. And I think now, like, I can't remember who it was, but there's a doll that has a hearing aid, and I can't remember which brand it is. There's a doll that has a hearing aid, and they have like, I think also with Barbie, you can buy a hearing aid accessory for your
Oh,
Barbie.
oh, that's
Um, yeah, and you know, I see more kids books. I mean, you know, having a kids brand, I follow a lot of different kids brands and stuff like that on Instagram. Um, and there are like kids books where there's a kid that has hearing loss, or I think of a book and a movie like Wonder. Um, you know, I think there's just a lot more awareness about it as well,
which is
and
good because
just so
honestly,
good.
I hated, I didn't have a good experience with it. I hated having hearing loss. I hated being the one, like the only one in my class in grade to have it. I stopped wearing them after grade two.
Hmm.
I didn't wear them. And then I didn't wear them at all. And then I think it was in university, I started only wearing them in class. And then when I got my first office job, that I wore at the office job because, again, professionalism, and I didn't want to miss anything. But
Yeah.
then I didn't wear them outside of that office job. And then it was only until everything happened with COVID, with the masks and the plexiglass, in social distancing, I couldn't hear
Hmm.
anybody.
Yeah.
And that was when I was like, okay, I need to put them on. But then it was a lot of that inner child healing that came through
Yep.
with that I had to go
Sure.
through. And
Yeah,
so
I can
that's a lot.
imagine the healing, the things that like came up, that
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
you know, in second grade in elementary school, you certainly were not equipped to like handle all the emotions and the things that were coming up, you know, putting on your hearing aids in the morning. So you didn't, right? And now you are. And like, because
Yeah.
this is what you do. And this is, I kind
Exactly.
of love that. Like, you know how it is. It's like when we do inner child work or like healing work, we're always being shown or like guided to something that has been a trigger for ourselves, and
Yeah.
then we get to move through that and bring that forward as
Yeah, because the
part
biggest,
of
I
us.
think I remember when I realized that, like, it took a while to get to this realization. It wasn't like, oh, I did an inner child healing meditation one day and then it came through the next day and it was like, oh, haha.
Hmm.
Like I find with inner child healing, it's layers, right? It's like you're peeling an onion. You get to the first layer and then as you dive deeper, it gets then that's where you find like the nugget. And
Yeah.
the nugget of that was basically like, I was never allowing myself to fully be me because I was hiding that version of myself because I was ashamed of it. But because I was never allowing myself to fully be me, I, I wasn't authentic. I wasn't true to myself. Like
Yeah.
it's not so much like, and then obviously, yeah, that reflects onto the world, but I was always hiding this part of me. And I was afraid for someone to see that part of me. I was afraid for, you know, in relationships, like I was afraid if I met someone and that they wouldn't be okay with this. If I got a job, I was always afraid they would fire me because I had a hearing loss. Like that was a legit fear, especially in restaurants. But restaurants, it's so hard to wear them because it's so loud. I actually wouldn't hear the people taking the orders, so I just never wore them in like the restaurant industry. And then I was afraid, in any job, like, and I thought like, oh, like I would fail out of school because I wouldn't hear something. So there was always this like, so it was like hiding this part of me, but then that fear that of being judged and criticized and, like let go, like abandoned because of this. And so it was a lot to uncover and a lot to navigate through, and being like, no, like, the guy I meet, like, or the partner I'm with now, like he accepts it. But I had to come to terms with that first myself before
Yeah.
having someone else accept that.
Yeah. That's just like, it's so hard to be human.
Yeah.
Like it's so fucking hard to be and just like try and navigate all of that. And I just and like it's just yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot to it's a lot to move through. It's a lot to heal. And it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And it's so, like your hearing loss is your superpower, which like sounds so cliche. But it does. It sounds so cliche. I think we hear that a lot in like our line of online industry.
Right.
Um, but it is. And like now you're like this incredible human. I mean, you've always been an incredible human, but like you're this incredible human, and people are like, oh, Julie has hearing loss. I have hearing loss too. And like, look at all this awesome shit she's doing.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah. And that was one thing, I guess, like one good thing about, for so long, me pretending I didn't have it. The good thing about that is I didn't hold myself back from doing anything I wanted to do because of it.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, even though I didn't wear it for like most of my life, I didn't wear any of my hearing aids most of my life, I still went on and did what everybody else did. I
Yeah.
didn't stop myself because I had it. I never used it as an excuse. I just went for it. So there is there's a reason why, and this, there's a reason why
Yeah.
everything happens and why it happens, how it happens. And sometimes we don't realize it right away. Sometimes it's in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was one thing for sure. It was just like, I don't I don't want to have a disability, so I'm not just be like everybody else.
Yeah. And like when you as a human were ready to when you had the tools and were equipped to like process the emotions and the childhood traumas and the fears and the doubt and all that stuff, it came forward for you to heal, and then you did that so beautifully. And
Yeah,
I love it. It all makes sense, right? Like when you're looking at it in hindsight, it all makes sense.
always.
In the moment you're like, this really fucking sucks.
But God, yeah. The
But
amount of times I've been like, why did I pick this path?
that is the most relatable thing ever. Oh, why do I do this?
Why?
Somebody please
Why
remind
did my
me.
why did my soul pick this journey right now? Oh, I know there's a reason,
Mhm.
but just
What is it?
yeah, but it's in hindsight, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes we'll realize it, sometimes we won't realize it, right? I think that sometimes it's letting go of the idea of like trying to make sense of everything.
Yeah. that's a very human thing. Like that's so much our human is our need to try to make sense and understand everything. And it's just like you don't have to.
No, because
Don't
then
have
it's just it goes back into kind of correlated with the sense of control, right? We
to.
love to control, we love to have a sense of control as
Yeah,
humans. And when
absolutely.
we don't, like we lose our shit. And whether it's like things such as like planning, right? Like planning trips, planning your week. The minute something kind of goes haywire, you're like, or just like control of like knowing that, you have a place to live and like signing the 1 year lease and like those small little things. So
Mhm.
sometimes like I think that sometimes people misinterpret control, but it comes in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just I think, now I think back to certain things like going to McGill and getting that master's degree and just the stuff like that. Like if I had tried to make sense of it, I never would have done it
Oh,
because it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense for me to go to McGill. I had no intentions. I have a master's degree in educational psychology. I don't work, I'm not a teacher. I never, that's not true. I was for a couple of years. But after I got my master's degree, not before. So I wasn't a teacher. Here I am going to get a master's degree in education. If I had to listen to the logic of that,
right.
it didn't make sense. And so I wouldn't have gone and I wouldn't have done it. And I wouldn't have met my best friends. I wouldn't have fallen in love with Montreal. It's still to this day my favorite city in the world. I wouldn't have written my book. And
Mhm.
I remember going to, because I had this idea like, oh, I want to create these resources for educators.
Yeah.
And I went to see the career counselor, one of the career counselors at McGill, and I took my book in with me and I explained everything that I did for the book, for my degree. Like, this is what I did, this is what I'm doing. I'm working at the Montreal Oral School for the Deaf. I created these resources and I started a website, like just kind of randomly on a whim, was like, oh, I'm gonna build a website and put this stuff up for sale. And like was laying it all out. And she dead ass looked at me and she went, why are you here? And not in like a condescending, rude way. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, you're a career counselor. What do you mean? Why am I here? And she was like, you very clearly know what it is you want to do. You very clearly have, a plan. You very clearly are following this nudge, this thing. And I was like, I guess I just needed someone to tell me that I'm not crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just that validation, right? Of
Yeah.
having it from an outside source. Cause like I've always had these big dreams and I still do now. Obviously, they've like, morphed and changed and everything. But I do remember when I first hired my first coach years ago, back in, it must have been in 2016. And she went through me like with a visualization and she's like, what do you envision? And I was like, yeah, I want to live in the mountains and the ocean like this when I was living back in Montreal. And I was like, I want to live there, create my own schedule, like do yoga when I feel like it, kind of like just go with the flow. And I didn't think that was possible at that time. My life was surrounded by people who had an office job, and I went
Yeah.
to business school. So I went to Concordia and I did a business degree. So I thought the only thing with life was that 9 to 5. And I did work for a really great company, Airbnb, and I loved the office. It was great, but I didn't love the job, but I loved the space and the people. And I thought, okay, this is where I'm gonna go. I thought, but then when I had that visualization experience with her, and this is what came through in that meditation, she was like, you can have that. And I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. I'm like, really? and I
Sure.
just and I just needed that person to just give that confirmation. And now fast forward years later, I have a place in Whistler, which is in the mountains, and I live here mostly full time, but then I also kept a room in Ucluelet, which is by the ocean. And I go there about once a month. So I am doing both. I'm doing the
Yeah.
mountains, the ocean.
It's
Uh,
insane how things come together. I love it.
yeah, yeah.
It
And I
is.
thought for the longest time that I needed to buy to do
Mhm.
both. That was another belief that I had to rewire. I thought I had to buy, but then I was like, well, what if I have like one budget for one place and another budget for the other place? And combined, interesting enough, would have been like a 2 bedroom in, like my own 2 bedroom that initially
Mhm.
I was planning on like manifesting in Tofino, for example. And I was like, well, what if I sacrifice and get roommates instead, but I do both? And then funny enough, the roommate in Whistler ended up being the person I'm dating now.
I
Universe
love
be
it.
funny. Universe be
Like, I
funny.
love when we see it all come together.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like these small little things that once you start unraveling and like believing that you can have it, but sometimes you just need that person to be like, yeah, it's possible. And it's that
Yeah.
permission slip because you're a manifestor, you don't need somebody to tell you what to do, but it's just someone being like, yeah, go for it. And then you run with it.
Yeah. Because you will talk yourself out of it every single time.
Oh, hands down.
If you try to do it on your own, like you will talk yourself out of it every single time. And so you need to have sometimes, you never need the permission, but the validation is very helpful, right? And so and sometimes that validation literally just comes from surrounding yourself by people who also do what they feel called to do, right? So it's like, and it doesn't have to be the same thing, right? The people in my world, like if I'll just use you as an example, we don't do the same thing, right? Like
Mm-mm.
I don't do inner child work, I don't do human design, but we are the same in that we both have these big visions and we have these desires and we're going for it.
Yeah.
Right. And so just being in the energy and in the space and just in conversation with people who are quote unquote doing the same thing, meaning following their heart, following their desire, and just acting, leaping from faith is sometimes all the validation you need.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
other times it's literally like, Julie, am I doing this right? Can I do this?
Yeah, and I love it because I do have like people in person and online that I surround myself with that are doing, as you said, they're not doing the same thing, but they are following their desires and that they know that life isn't just a box of what
Yeah.
we once upon a time thought it would be, right? Like the whole like you need to go in this path, career path, and these are the only ones that are available to you. Now, we know that there's more to it. And because of that, surrounding people that are also going for that and have that similar mindset is that permission. And I do also love to work not 24/7, but time with coaches, other spiritual mentors
Yeah.
that do help guide in the direction you want to go to, because sometimes I think that they will see something that you won't, or they
Yeah,
would
absolutely.
give you a breadcrumb that you wouldn't have heard of before on your own. And it's just that little piece of the puzzle that gets you to that next step in life, wherever that step is.
Yeah. And that stuff is always accessible, right? And like I I went on an Instagram rant about this the other day, but like literally, if you want to work with someone, like consume their free content. Because here's the thing, you might not have the means to hire a coach or a mentor, and that's totally okay. Spend $20 on the book that they wrote. Follow them on Instagram, follow them on their social media accounts. All of that is free. Take their free master classes, join their free Facebook group, or whatever it is, right? There are ways to, shift your energy or to like, dip your toe into this person that you're like, into their energy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not
And it's
about,
really that easy. It's really that easy. And it's
yeah,
one sentence that that person will say that will give you that breadcrumb. And
yeah,
sometimes that's all you need, right? You don't need to know the answer or the like how everything's gonna unfold, like, or else life will be boring, right? It's predictable.
yeah. We don't want that.
We don't want that. No, we want exciting, fun stuff like new things. But it's yeah, and it's really interesting actually. I shared this with my followers last week. I went down to Vancouver and I was like, oh, I'm in the city, like I've been like kind of like taking a slow point with my business, and because it's like it's been summer and usually like summer my business slows down, and I
Yeah.
just been honoring that. Obviously there's sometimes that little
Yeah.
you should be, but it's
Mhm.
I'm navigating, I'm working through it and realizing, hey, like life doesn't stop, like my business doesn't stop because I'm slowing down. But I was in the city and I'm like, I haven't done like a tarot reading in person in forever. Like I've always done it through online, whether it's like, I'll work with a reader online, or I've done like an Akashic Records reading with you. I've never done it in person. And there is something beautiful about in person, because
Oh,
the
for
cards are
sure.
literally
Yeah.
laid out in front of you, and
Mhm.
you're in the space, the
The
room.
energy is very different.
Yes. And as I was driving to the store that offers readings, the car in front of me had license plate 000. And it's the first time I've seen that angel number. And I was like, okay, I like interesting. Okay, like I was spirit, I'm listening, like
Mhm.
what does that mean? And I was just kind of like, so something was like, it's not gonna happen. But I was just like, let me just go. So I walk into a shop. I saw like the poster of who the reader of the day was, and I was like, like kind of like, I don't know if I feel her vibe.
Yeah.
The person that was working, like the cashier or like the store clerk, she was chatting with her for a really long time in that the space where they do the reading. So I was like browsing around the store, but I was just kind of like waiting around to be like, hey, I want a reading. But it was like taking so long. And I'm like, there's somebody here in the store. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't
You
as
didn't even
like,
ask me if I needed anything.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. And so it was like little things like that. And she comes out, I asked, and then she went and spoke to the reader. And she comes back to me. She's like, the reader had a very heavy reading earlier. She's not taking any more readings for the rest of the day. And I was like, okay, it's not meant, like the universe is telling me no.
mhm.
But then she gave me another store with the number. She's like, call them. They also do readings. So I'm like, okay, let me try one more time, just because it's a breadcrumb, right? And you never
Yeah.
know. Maybe I wasn't meant to go to that store,
Mhm.
right? Maybe I was meant to see another reader. Call that store. And then they were like, oh no, our next appointment is not until like 3 hours from now. And I was like, it was the end of the like my day. Like I was ready to go back up to Whistler, and I'm like,
Right.
I didn't want to wait around. Not like, you know what? I'm not meant to know right now. And I had to sit with that unknown, with that. I'm not meant to know what I'm supposed to do with my business. I'm not meant to know the next step right now. I'm not, and it's okay. And I'm just gonna sit and surrender and see what happens.
Yeah. And you like just right before you at the very beginning of that story, you said it's summer and you're slowing down. Like, had you gone to that reading and they said, oh, like this is cool and this is cool and like all these awesome things are happening, you like went home and been like, okay, let's put these awesome things into action, right? Instead of slowing down.
Yeah, exactly. Or it would have maybe triggered me.
Yeah.
Maybe would have like something like would have been said that I would have not landed, or my ego wouldn't been ready to hear,
Mm-hmm.
or like maybe because sometimes I do believe in not forcing a reading, or like
Oh yeah.
any form of reading, because if the universe is saying like no, I do think it's just like your ego is not ready to hear, because sometimes there's things that come up that are hard truths, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, gotta sit with this. And if your
Yeah.
ego's not ready to hear it, you're gonna dismiss it, and miss out on what you're supposed to have heard, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I miss out on that growth. It's a growth opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
all it's just like I just love like the divine God. I love stories like this. They just make me
Yeah.
like so happy. And sometimes you still like don't know, like I'll give an example of this. Like sometimes you still don't know what the sign is, right? So like you seeing the 000 and then hearing or just like feeling like this isn't going to happen and then it doesn't happen. But sometimes, like the other day, I woke up and I picked up my phone to see what time it was. It was 5:55
Mhm.
a.m. And then like got up, got ready for the day. I had to go up into the grocery store. So my mom and I are going to the grocery store. And there are two cars parked beside each other in the parking lot, and both of their license plates ended in 555. Both of them. So then my mom and I go into the city and I see another license plate, 555. And I'm like, okay, like I'm listening.
Right.
And 555, it just for context, if you don't know, five is a number of change. And so five, three times amplified, something is shifting, something big is shifting.
Yeah.
So I'm like, but what is shifting? Because here's the thing, we look at angel numbers and we go, ooh, this is exciting. Sometimes the change is not exciting, people, okay? Because sometimes it's not.
Hello.
And so I actually kind of found myself throughout the day, whenever I saw 555, like when I saw that 555 in the city, that was the fourth one I'd seen that on that day. And I found myself kind of panicking. Like, oh my, what's happening? Like, is this a good change? Is this a bad change? Why am I seeing this so many times? What's coming up? And then after that, like after I had my panic, I kept seeing 777.
Okay.
Which is good. That's a
Yes.
good
Yeah. Yeah.
angel
Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
We like that one.
Yes. That one is like, yeah, it's like good luck.
It's good luck. Kind of like well, I mean, your guides are always with you, but just that reminder, like sort of heaven and earth are meeting, I guess would be
Yeah.
you could say it that way. But yeah, so then I calmed down a little bit after that.
Yeah, no, I get it too with 555. Sometimes because there's been moments where I've seen 555 and it's been shitty,
Yeah. Oh, for
like
sure. Me too.
things
Yeah.
just crumble, like, but for a good reason, right? It's always at the end, it's
Yeah.
for our highest good.
Again, it sucks in the moment, but in
Exactly.
hindsight, you see how it was for you, right?
Exactly. But then there's other times where I've seen, and then I think that was a lot so when I saw the 555 with a lot of associated with like shitty stuff, like shitty change, well, in the moment felt shitty.
Yeah.
That was a lot of when I was really in that like 3 years of like shadow work and inner child healing, that like start of
Mm-hmm.
that is when I found those moments came. And then now it's like a balance. It's a balance of like things changing and shifting, but then also good stuff, like good change and shift.
Yeah.
So now I'm starting to like not freak out every time I see 555. Like now I'm starting to be like, no, Julie, look at all these other good stuff that have happened instead of like that doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they're,
It's again, and like because our human like wants to make sense of everything and try to understand everything and know what's coming.
yeah,
Our mind immediately goes, okay, so this is what's been happening in my life lately. And I just saw 555 like four times. So this could happen. Or like maybe this is what it's going to be shifting. Or like maybe it's going to be this. And then you just get caught up in your own rumination
yeah.
and just stop it.
Well, the other thing is what I've also realized, and I wonder if like you've also realized it too, is that now the things that when things crumble and
Mm-hmm.
things shift, I I don't freak out as much as I once did. Like
Yeah.
I can navigate it a little bit better. My mindset around it is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like, oh, this was supposed to be let go. Like there's a reason why this has ended there. Even though in the moment it hurts, it feels shitty and whatever, I can shift my energy around it instead of
Yeah.
like, oh, this like, why me? Like the victimizing, why me? Or, kind of like feeling like it's the end of the world, even though, that feeling you get. I find I'm navigating that aspect a lot more differently. So those moments don't feel as heavy as they once did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, I think my nervous system has settled down a bit. And I think probably you would say something similar, like going through those years of the shadow work
Mhm.
have really regulated my nervous system. That has been very, very helpful. And so now, when something crumbles, I don't panic, and I'm human. I let myself feel the emotions of the panic and the fear and the doubt. And then I'm like, okay, I trust you.
Yeah.
Like, I trust.
Yeah.
Because we are still human, having this human experience, and living in this human planet. So I think that my nervous system is a lot more subtle to change. And I also think that my intuition is just better in the way that I'm more connected to it. And so sometimes, when things crumble, I'm like, I saw this coming. Like,
Right.
I felt this before. And probably that, my human wanted to hang on to it for whatever reason. And it crumbled anyway, because that's the nature of the universe and how things work. But yeah, yeah, for sure. I definitely handle things a lot differently than even just even just last year around certain topics, right? Because this has so many different layers to it, right? So
Mm.
if we're talking about crumblings around, job loss or friendships, those two topics are very different
Mhm.
energies.
It
They're,
is.
your nervous system needs to like acclimate to both of those topics,
Yeah. And
right?
how they crumble too,
Hmm.
right? There's one thing of like, let's say you look at friendships. When you just stop talking to each other and time goes, you're not keeping in touch, you're not hanging out, you just kind of go two separate ways. That's almost peaceful, so to speak, right? You're like, okay, that friendship, they were meant to do their thing, I'm meant to do my thing. But then when there's a conflict that happens, like a fight or a
Yeah.
disagreement, then that's different on the nervous system. And the same thing with work. It's like if it's, you got fired unjustly or versus you quit, like you quit
Yeah.
in a positive way, you quit in a negative way, whatever it is, it's different on your nervous system. So the how it happens, but I do believe that no matter what, as you said earlier, you just honor whatever you're feeling in that moment, you honor
Mhm.
yourself. Like if it is that you're going to throw a temper tantrum, like a tantrum on the floor and cry and, you know, let that happen in your own space. Like release that, sink into the fears, the doubts and sit with it, but then pull yourself out. Be like, okay, we done?
Yeah.
Okay, now, okay, let's put our big girl pants on and let's deal with it. Really.
Yeah. That's all you can do.
Yeah, bring on your inner child and be like, you good? You had your space. I love you. You're cool. Okay. Now, are you
Moving
ready?
on.
We're going in the next step of life. Let's go. Bring you
Yeah.
along. Because
Yeah.
that's really all your inner child wants, is to be part of you and to feel loved and, you know, secure
Heard.
and heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oh my God, it's been an hour.
It has been an hour.
It's been an
Probably
hour.
not quite an hour. We were on here chatting for a little bit before we
Yes,
hit record.
that's true. That is true. But I am gonna like, kind of wrap this up.
Yeah.
I did love this conversation. I love how it took so many different angles.
I know, so many different angles. I don't think we talked about anything not that we really had a plan. You did say you wanted to talk about Akasha.
And that didn't happen.
We
No.
didn't even touch that.
It's okay. It wasn't meant to be. Just
All
trusting
right,
the
another time.
exactly another time. Um, and so I love giving at the end of the podcast space for you to talk about your services, your offers, where people can find you, as if people want to connect more about what you do.
Oh my goodness, you can find me like everywhere. My kids brand is called Wolf and Whimsy Kids. So I have a website, wolfandwhimsykids.com. Instagram is wolf and whimsy underscore kids. If you go to my website, it has all of the social media links and stuff there. You can find my books and stuff for my kids. If you have kids or no kids, you can find my books on Amazon. My website studio is called Oh the Studio, like OH, like oh the studio. Yeah, where'd you get your web design? Oh, the studio. Okay. Oh yeah, so ohthestudio.com, oh the studio on Instagram. You can also find me at luxuriously fierce on Instagram with an underscore at the end, luxuriously fierce underscore. I've been taking a little hiatus from that for a little bit, but I'm still over there, and I plan to come back. So
Well, people can go and view all your content that you already posted. And that's
yeah,
the beauty of
true.
social media, is that your work is there.
Yeah, it never lacks for content.
No, no. And people can go scroll. Like, I mean, I don't know how many posts your Luxury Fierce account has, but I know my account, like I got over
I don't either.
1,000. Like, that's like a go, have fun.
Yeah,
Just,
check it all out.
yeah, I love that. And thank you so much for being on this podcast. I
Thank
had
you
such
for
a good
having me. I love sitting down and chatting with you.
I love it too. Like, we had, like, even last time when I was on your podcast, we had such a good conversation, and it's
Good.
just it flows, it's easy, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Love
So
it.
thank you again. And I am going to include all those things in the show notes. So for everybody who's listening, like, no need to go rushing for a pen. You will see all the links in the show notes of where you can find May. And yeah, amazing.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. And